friends.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so unfortunate. And you're right. I think what they're thinking right now, of course, they're focusing on Ukraine. But I think, correct me if I want to know what you think. I actually think the war probably won't last real long. I think Ukrainians probably run out of the ammunition and run out of people, whatever, even though it's very brutal now, but I actually think it's probably winding down. And they already started, seems to me, they already started to move on to China, because I haven't you noticed the past few days, they were talking about, oh, if you dare to provide, they call it lethal aid or lethal support or something to Russia, it's Blinken started talking about it. According to him, there is intelligence saying that China is seriously considering provide lethal. They use the word lethal a lot to make it sound very serious. Lethal aid. And then right after that, again, Lindsey Graham was on some show, was talking about the same thing. China, don't you dare. And then the U.S. ambassador to UN, I think she also brought this up. So it's a whole series of people that is talking about if China dare to give aid, lethal aid to Russia. Sounds like some kind of repercussion is going to happen, of course. I just wonder, first of all, we don't even know whether it's true that China is considering giving lethal weapon to Russia. Secondly, if it's not true, but they keep on talking about it, why are they doing that? Are they trying to shifting now to the blame to China? If the war doesn't go well, they can say, well, it's China who helped Russia, and then immediately can go on to China. I wonder, I want to see what your take
Sure,
on
I got a different perspective on that. That was a preemptive diplomatic strike. China
Okay.
had made it clear we're putting together a peace plan.
Yeah.
And we're putting together a plan for peace in Ukraine, but not just for peace in Ukraine, but a format for resolving issues worldwide using diplomacy and international law.
Yeah.
And the U.S. saw that as a problem because, when it comes to peace, the neocons, that's anathema to everything they believe in. So they felt like, okay, they know, first of all, Russia is a first-rate military. It is fairly obvious that Russia does not need China. China does not need Russia. They can certainly work together, but neither Russia or China doesn't need lethal aid from the other. They have their military defensive powers, adequate defensive powers. This was about saying we've got to do something to because when they say that, so China's saying we're coming up with a peace plan, and the U.S. says, oh, they want a war plan. They're going to send lethal aid. That's all it was. It was a game to try to thwart China's credibility as a peacemaker. Well, China can't possibly be trying to make peace because they're providing weapons, and when that's absolutely absurd. I would say this though: the plan by the neocons was clearly we're going to weaken Russia, and strengthen our coalition, which is their coalition, their vassals, their empire. We'll weaken Russia, strengthen our empire. That will allow us to then go after China. They've had the opposite effect. Russia's stronger. Their coalition is crumbling and falling apart, economically falling apart. The political base, people are in the streets, people are upset and angry. Economically, they're having a lot of problems. So their plan to go after Russia first and China second has gone horribly wrong, catastrophically wrong for them. I would argue they're stuck in the Ukraine crisis, that it's kind of like a rat, like one of those glue mouse traps where a mouse gets in it and the harder he tries to pull, the worse he gets stuck. There's no way out for them. Okay. Yeah, at this point. So I think that they recognize they cannot do, quote, confront China as long as they're mired in this particular trap in Ukraine that they set for themselves. But there's no real way out for them. They can't just wake up tomorrow and say, guys, never mind, we're out of here. Because at that point, they've lost a war to Russia. They've lost. It's it. They went in, they fought Russia with a proxy war, and they lost. So they can't just walk away with a loss. Furthermore, then their allies, so-called, their vassals in Europe, their victims in Europe, then look at them and say, what the hell did we do all this for? Really? We destroyed everything, and you said you have to stay with them forever, and then you just woke up one day and just said, never mind, we're going to go over here and confront China. It would be catastrophic for their coalition. And so and meanwhile, Russia would continue to take everything they want, and Russia is in no mood to make a Minsk III deal. Russia knows they cannot make a deal with the neocons. You can't make a deal with a sociopath. A sociopath can make any deal and give you any promise in the world because they have no intent of fulfilling their promises. Russia knows that the only thing they can get out of this conflict is physically what they can take.
Okay.
But I see no way out for the neocons at this point.
So you don't think that they are going to start war with China? Because not that long ago, this is I think a 4-star general, Mike Minihan, he wrote in a memo to his people, essentially saying, in 2 years, 2025, this is the time we're going to start war with China. So what do you take on that one?
I would say this: there is an intent in some circles of neocon circles that would like that to happen. But a couple of things they can't just say, okay, we're going to attack China. They need Taiwan to be the spark. They need somebody to be the spark, but they also recognize they are mired in this Ukraine conflict. And as long as this Ukraine conflict goes, as long as it goes on, they can't really do much of anything else. They also realize that they've got to find a way. Well, let me add this. This is something else that I think that is very important. Clearly, there is a war going on inside the U.S. Neocon government military establishment that's spilling out into the open, and that was the Nord Stream attack. Clearly, some insiders are furious at Biden, and they particularly named the neocon cabal, Newland, Sullivan, you know what I mean? They particularly named them, and they let the cat out of the bag on these people. And Seymour Hersh said, this is only first base. This is not the end of it. There's more to come. So not only do they have trouble with their coalition in Europe falling apart, not only do they have problems in Ukraine that they're mired in there and there's no way out, internally, they have now a war that's spilling out into the open. So, it's conceivable that this neocon project, this neocon group, falls apart before they get a chance. When the recognition of what I refer to in the Ukraine project as the mother of all debacles, when they recognize the level of military, political, and diplomatic debacle that they have created here, this thing might not hold together. So there may be plans. And not only that, they've set up themselves in this, they've set China, and they've created this Eurasian coalition of, say, China, Russia, India. I would add Saudi Arabia. I would add, to some extent, Brazil. And, I could go on with the countries. They've created this powerful coalition that's coming together economically, that's going to say, wait a minute, we are doing very, very well off this coalition. We do not want you to go in here and screw this thing up for them. So they're creating a dynamic that's going to make it very, very difficult. The longer this thing drags out, the more difficult it will be for them to do it. And if it does resolve itself, it will only resolve itself with a Russian all-out victory. And at that point, the debacle is to a level that I think this neocon machine starts to crumble.
Talking about the whole thing, there's one thing that I want to use this opportunity. I find that some of the people who are against the war, but they really are against the war with Russia. They are fine with having a war with China. Josh Hawley, is that his name? One of the senators, he actually recently said something like that. It's like, why are we wasting time with Russia? Our real enemy is China. And lots of I find common Americans feel that way too. I find that, when I see some of the comments there below, like the RAN, different people's programs who are clearly not supporting this war with Ukraine, they seem okay with China. I think there's some misunderstanding about things. They are things that the US State Department intentionally not to tell people. For example, there is no mention of this three communique, which is the funding documents between the US and China in terms of the diplomatic relationship. In there, it's clearly stated, there's just one China, and US recognize that. And the three communique actually signed by three presidents of two parties, Nixon, Carter, and Reagan. So there are actually three presidents signed a three communique with China. And they repeatedly said in those communique that United States recognized just one China. And if you read carefully in the State Department website, that's more or less what they're saying too. But when you listen to Sullivan, when you listen to Blinken, you always get the feeling that, and certainly Lindsey Graham kind of people, you always got the feeling like Taiwan is some kind of a separate country. They give you that impression, even though it's not true. And the other thing is, I think the other thing most people probably don't know is Taiwan's own constitution says it's part of China. They define the territory the same as the mainland China defines territory. The dispute or the disagreement is, okay, who should be the legitimate representative of China? And what's the name of it? Because in Taiwan, they call themselves Republic of China. In the mainland people, it's called the People's Republic of China. So there is dispute within, but in any event, that seemed to me like a domestic Chinese dispute. It really has nothing to do with the US. And in the three communiques, it's also said that this is a problem the Chinese people need to solve themselves. But our, State Department, it's not just Blinken. I think even before that, it was Pompeo, right? They all kind of are giving people the false information, the false impression that somehow Taiwan is very separate from China. It's a different country. We have to protect it, So I find that that's, we need to, I would like you to use your platform because you have lots of followers to tell people that, there is a three communique. There is, Taiwan's own constitution. And of course, the United Nations only recognize, the People's Republic of China, etc. There's so many things that people don't know. They just they have been given the impression that Taiwan is somehow separate. What's your take on that?
Well, my take is this. Keep in mind something. Before that, it was Xinjiang. There's genocide in Xinjiang. The first genocide where there's no refugees and there's actually more people that have been genocided than before. That's kind of a reverse genocide. So the bottom line is these things are preposterous and unrelated to the real problem. Right? First of all, you've got to examine what's the problem here. The problem, and you'll hear Tony Blinken talk about it, the rules-based international order. Their real issue is something far different. And people will say the rules-based international order. I got caught up in that. And I said, well, there are no rules. Where are the rules? You can't find any rules, right? It's just a recipe for US hegemony. I figured it out. There are rules, the rules of feudalism.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is people who see the world as a feudal, because the key in rules-based international order is the last word, order. The United States is trying to, the Blinken, the US, the UK, the Anglo-Saxon empire is trying to maintain an order. And the order is the US and it's a hierarchy. The US and the UK are at the top of the order. And as in an old feudal order, they would be the nobility, the noble class, right? The Europeans, the French, the Germans, etc., would be in the old feudal order, the commoners. Those are the people that lived pretty well. They lived okay. They knew good and well. They weren't born within the context of that hierarchy. They weren't born at a high station like the noble class, but they weren't peasants either. So they lived okay. And then beneath them, you have the global South and Asia, and Latin America, the peasants. Yeah. So it is they can't come out and say we have a feudal order and we're the noble class. And let me give you an example of this. Germany got literally attacked by the United States. The US attacked Germany. France, Germany, none of the European countries are saying there's anything wrong with this. Why? Because what keeps a feudalistic order intact is that the people within that order are willing to accept their place. Because in an order like this, depending upon the station you're born in life determines your expectation of rights. The Germans and the French know good and well they do not have an expectation of rights as high as the Brits and the US, because that's the noble class. They know that the US can act on a whim. The noble class can come up, walk up to a commoner, a duke or an earl or a king at any day, can walk into town and walk up to a blacksmith and just slap him and walk away, and there's nothing that he can say. So they know that because they understand that's the order. So Germany, France, they understand that the US, within the context of this order, can do anything they want to them. However, they still believe in this order, we live better than the peasants. We're doing okay. So we're going to maintain an order. Even though we got to take a hit every now and then, we're better than the peasants. Now, what happens when the people that you have designated as the peasant class in this order starts to rise up and start to say, we have the same rights as anyone else? Time out. No, you don't. We have the same rights to economic advancement as anyone else. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're screwing up our order. And the people who are, when in any order, in any hierarchical feudalistic order such as this, who's going to defend that order? The people at the top, because they're the ones that benefit the most. So Blinken and these people are simply saying, we've got a nice order here. And we've had it where we're the noble class, and darn you peasants have the unmitigated gall to now not only to demonstrate the order is built upon a foundation that the people at the top, the noble class, are intellectually and culturally superior to the peasants at the bottom. Therefore, they deserve to be the noble class because they're superior. Now, the Chinese come along and say, well, we have a system, a different kind of order, and it works. And what do you know? It's working better than yours. Now, not only do they advance past their station in the order, but they now demonstrate to Africa and Latin America, hey, you know, there are other ways to do things that works, and they say, and we'll help you rise up too. So the business about Taiwan and 3 communiques and Xinjiang and freedom of navigation, they'll just keep making things up, because the reality is there is a threat to this feudalistic hierarchical order that says the US can do anything they want. Let me add one other thing. That's why the US will invade Libya, Iraq, blow countries up, Serbia. And then when Russia says, we're drawing a red line on our border, time out. Based on the fact that you're a peasant, you don't have the authority to do what members of the noble class can do. Because when they say, Russia, you can't do that, they're not saying nobody can invade another country. Now, they have to say that. That's not what they mean. What they mean is you can only invade another country if you're in the class of nobility. You're in the peasant class. You do not have the prerogatives that we have in our class. It is trying to maintain a world hierarchy and a class-based system that has already collapsed. What's bad is it's not that they're trying to maintain one. They're trying to go back and resurrect one that has already collapsed, which makes it impossible.
Okay.
I hope I wasn't too philosophical or.
Oh, no, it's your description is a very good explanation of this rules-based order, because Blinken always saying that. They say that a lot. And in the beginning, I was like you, what is the rule? You know, where is it written? You know, who agreed to it? You know, that kind of a rule. But I don't find anything. I just keep on hearing it. But you explain what is the rule. The rule is everybody has their place, and you're supposed to stay in your place, right? And they're supposed to stay in their place, right? Like you say, the UK and the United States, you know, this is our place, and you're supposed to stay where you belong, where you're supposed to stay. That's the rule. You explain that very clearly and very enlightening. So thank you.
And the other part of it is that because it is predatory, because their system relies on a predatory version of capitalism, where so in the same way that the original feudalism lived off the labor of peasants. So if you're a nobleman and you have these large farms and fields, you can't work them yourselves. You need thousands of peasants. You're only rich because all of these peasants work in the field. If the peasants wake up and say, we ain't working in the fields no more, everything falls apart.
Yeah.
So that was very predatory on the peasant class. Well, right now they say, look, we need cheap labor from China. They were going to act in a way, okay, of slavery. I'm a Black person. What was that? We're going to go to Africa and we're going to get free labor. They were stealing labor. And then they go there and we'll steal your gold and we'll steal your spices and we'll steal. So it was, we will maintain a labor class.
Yeah.
And we will take their resources, take their labor, etc. They will stay in their place and we'll stay rich based on that. And China's position was, China opened up and said, we've got a lot of labor here. And they said, great, we'll come in there and use that cheap labor. But China then was able to turn those investments that they made in China for cheap labor, they were industrious enough to turn that into advancements for themselves. And now they're saying, wait a minute, you're trying to turn the peasant class, bring the peasant class, I'll put it like this. You're not trying to change the peasant class. You're discrediting the system and changing the system, and you're creating a new system.
Yeah.
And so they are freaked out about that. But again, they've mired themselves in Ukraine. That is a trap that they set for Russia, and they got trapped in it themselves. And the longer it goes on, the bigger trouble, the harder it's going to be for them to do anything, because their whole system is crumbling. It's being discredited.
Mm-hmm.